It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That was written by Dickens, right? Or, according to my 8th grade English teacher, Melville. It's no wonder that when I asked someone how they did on that last test, the common answer is good. I did good. So here's the deal. Language in this country is deteriorating. Not only is bilingualism lost on most Americans, but mastery of our own language, which so many of us speak so well, has become an absolute rarity. We have lost appreciation for the importance and power of words. And in a time when the communication of information has become a central focus in society, that's not a good thing. This is the best of times, and yet the worst, when we can't even appreciate the language we speak. And so to begin, we must first establish the problem, then determine the cause, and finally, discover the difference a word can make. Now, the issue at hand here is a lack of respect for the languages of this world. For example, on June 26, 1963, President John F. Kennedy declared his personal state of being to the people of Berlin. Ich bin ein Berliner. I'm a jelly donut. Didn't translate too well, did it? You see, there's a joke that goes, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. But if you only speak 1 language, you're an American. However, there are students who study in Europe who speak a multitude of languages because the countries are so close together, they say. Well, I have a Russian friend who speaks both Spanish and Japanese fluently because the countries are so close together. And so America is big, but there is so much pluralism in this country. And yet there are people who can hardly speak English, let alone another language. And this issue is largely a result of our paradoxical way of looking at languages. Opponents of bilingualism will argue that a flood of Asian or Hispanic immigrants to this country will threaten the English language. So perhaps we love this country and its language too much, or do we just love ourselves? Because we still see an irreverence for books and education in this country. Why is it that people don't read anymore? Why is it that people don't write anymore? Why is it that in a world and time when communication should be easier than ever before, we choose to fight rather than to speak or to listen? Because instead of learning grammar in grammar school, the children of this country learn who knows what. Instead of choosing to go to the bookstore, they choose to go to the video game store instead. So perhaps we just have a case of egocentrism on our hands. And perhaps it is this point of view that keeps us from seeing the difference one word can make. And one word can make all the difference in the world. I had a teacher once tell me that one word is what makes a lightning bug and not a lightning bolt. And today we have entire, delicate, diplomatic balances hinging on the meaning of one word, peace. Look to the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine. To one side, peace has meant a return to their homes, and to the other, it has meant the unopposed acquisition of their Holy Land. But to both, this misunderstanding has meant anguish, decades of warfare, hundreds of lives lost. What a difference one word can make. Language is such an integral part of all our lives. It marks the difference between I love and I love you, between light and lightness, between ideas and people. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said, "Language is the blood of the soul into which thoughts run and out of which they grow." So foster your thoughts. The next time you go to a bookstore, take a second look. Do well on your next test. And perhaps prove my English teacher wrong. It was the best of times, and nothing more.
A land in turmoil cried out her hero. She was Xena, a warrior princess forged in the heat of battle. The power, the passion, the danger. Her courage will change the world. Those lovely, thrillingly melodramatic words. Oh, I remember them well. I heard them every week at 4 o'clock exactly and became more excited with every word. Now I know that at this time other kids were watching, say, SpongeBob SquarePants, but it just wasn't the same. SpongeBob lived in a pineapple and played his nose for a flute. My hero roamed the ancient world, helping the little people by slashing through the evil minions that were oppressing them. SpongeBob didn't stand a chance. He was for kids, but I wanted to be an adult, so I watched Xena, warrior princess. Naturally. Xena did amazing things like leading her armies through the cannibal-infested jungles of ancient Greece. No matter that there were never jungles or cannibals in Greece. Xena met famous people too, legends of antiquity on a consistent basis. She helped Helen escape the Trojan War, assisted Brutus in assassinating Julius Caesar, and even freed Rome from the clutches of the mad Emperor Caligula. What did it matter that Xena would have been well over 800 years old after meeting all these famous figures? The most exciting thing Xena did, however, was to romp through both heaven and hell to save her arch-enemy's soul. Along the way, she intensely annoyed the Archangel Michael and convinced Lucifer that sin was the way to go. All this in between being crucified by Julius Caesar and resurrected by a suspiciously Jesus-like character named Eli. Then again, that first resurrection doesn't hold a candle to the second one, and oh my gosh, the third, you have to see it. All right, so my favorite show was a little bit ridiculous. It was still important to me. When Xena masqueraded as Cleopatra, I checked out every book I could carry on the pyramids, the pharaohs, archaeology. When Xena engaged in mighty battle with love interest / arch nemesis Ares, I read ancient mythology like a fiend. Xena caused me to step into reality from my childish world of fantasy. But I gotta say, interest in reality wasn't the main reason why Xena was so critical to my development. Xena was my hero. She was strong, confident, self-assured. Everything I, as a shy, pudgy 10-year-old, aspired to be. So, every week, I watched all but the boldest give way to Xena's iron will. I developed a penetrating stare, a contemptuous sneer, and now, I always get my way. Well, maybe not always. My mom can still boss me around with ease, and some of my teachers retain the power to guilt me to tears, but that's it, I swear. I really have come a long way from the child who refused to speak in class, who read books every day at lunch because she was too embarrassed to socialize. That child, well, she's all but gone now, and here I stand, a completely different being altogether. I'm a stage person now, and last year, I sang in an opera. Rather ironically, I was the bad guy, the one foiling good intentions, manipulating characters, being bold, daring, aggressive, everything I could have hoped for. You know, I have watched every single episode of Xena Warrior Princess ever created, except for the final one, in which Xena dies for the last time. I mean, if Xena dies, what about me? She was the catalyst for my transition from child to young adult, but I'm not finished yet. Last year, I nearly vomited when I went up on stage to sing my aria, and I still haven't worked up the courage to ask my friend out on a date. My witnessing Xena's death would end her lesson forever, but I'm not ready to quit growing, and I have a lot more to learn. That said, I really don't think I'll ever watch Xena's last episode. But next week, when I ask Dan out on a date, I won't hesitate. I'll just ask myself, what would Xena do?
Welcome to 60 Minutes. And in breaking news tonight, March 16th, 2026, the United States has invaded Atlantis in the latest of a series of puzzling wars. Critics state that Atlantis doesn't even exist, but the United States government is quick to point to a Halliburton map of South America with Atlantis clearly penciled in off the coast of Brazil. Along with the order to invade, Congress has also awarded Halliburton a multi-billion-dollar contract for repairs in Atlantis after the invasion. This is the 17th nation that Halliburton will have the good fortune of rebuilding. Other leaders and nations that we've invaded include Julius Caesar and the Roman Empire, Genghis Khan and the Mongols, and Leif Erikson and the Vikings. Of course, all of these just invasions took place with the patriotic Halliburton providing vital evidence. Recently, I was asked to do an expose for 60 Minutes when Halliburton found himself handed a blank check due to a number of contacts within the government and was given a no-bid contract, eventually worth $12 billion, to repair and rebuild Iraq's infrastructure and oil wells. As the war progressed, Halliburton became more liberal with their spending and accounting practices. For example, Halliburton overcharged the United States government by more than $27.4 million for 28,000 meals that were never served. Truck with a flat tire? No problem. torch the $85,000 truck and charge Uncle Sam for another one. And the cost of a single case of soda, $45. Of course, all of these miscalculations added up to about $1.8 billion worth of unaccounted for expenditures. The level of fraud here makes Enron look like a choir boy. Due to the lack of government intervention and the money flowing in, Halliburton found itself in corporate greed heaven. There was, of course, the slight problem of continuing these profits after Iraq. The solution was simple. Create another war. If one war had more than double their stock prices and quadruple their profits, imagine what 2, 3, or 17 more wars could do. In order to maximize their profits, Halliburton preferred that the country that was attacked didn't actually exist. That way, all the profits went directly to them, and they didn't even have to pretend to work. With the strategic digital manipulation of photographs of metal farm silos into photographs of nuclear weapons facilities, Halliburton was always able to convince the government that a certain country had nuclear weapons and posed a grave threat to global civilization. Of course, after each invasion, Halliburton was rewarded for its patriotic and loyal intelligence reports and given a multi-billion-dollar contract to rebuild what amounted to nothing. I would like to conclude my report and this segment of 60 Minutes with the recent designation of Halliburton Day every February 14th in honor of Halliburton's patriotic pursuit of peace, love, and understanding. By ferreting out all those evil countries and their nuclear weapons, I guess everyone forgot about their desecration of lands in Ecuador and Burma and their bribery of Nigerian officials. But don't let me dampen your festive spirit. Let's celebrate corporate greed, war profiteering, human rights abuse, and bribery. Halliburton Day in honor of the Halliburton way.
Every new year of his term, President Theodore Roosevelt, that paragon of American democracy, would hold a party. He would stand outside the White House, and people would come just to shake his hand. Everybody was welcome. Ministers, princes, and ambassadors came, but also beggars, carpenters, chimney sweeps. People of all colors and walks of life would come and wait in line for hours. And every year, without fail, President Roosevelt would vigorously shake millions of hands. He never faltered, nor did he show any signs of strain. And at the end of the day, after accomplishing this awesome feat, President Roosevelt would retire to his chambers and disgustedly scrub himself clean. He had a point. Shaking hands is pretty unhygienic. It's unhygienic, awkward, and totally unnecessary. The human being is in many ways an animal. Most of the time, we move without thinking. We simply act upon instinct. And one of the more prominent ways in which we display this bestial nature is through the abuse of our hands and their wrinkled appendages, the fingers. These hands, 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals, and 14 phalanges, are everywhere. We bite our nails, we pick our noses, we sift through dirt with our fingers, we scratch our bottoms. It has been proven by scientists that the handshake is one of the top transmitters of the common cold. And we share these vessels of filth with those whom we know or hold dearly or simply meet for the first time. And we consider this a sign of affection, of respect, of esteem. Well, for a country that promotes a hygienic lifestyle, that seems a little bit backwards, don't you think? Not only are handshakes unhygienic, they can also lead to awkward situations. There are millions upon millions of unwritten rules pertaining to handshake etiquette, and no one can keep up with the latest trends. People wonder how many times to shake, whether the palm faces up or down enough, or sometimes whether to shake at all. Do I shake hands with my teacher? My parents? Does this put me on the same level as these people? Do I shake hands with the pretty sister of my best friend? Or would such a move seem suggestive or daring? Then there are ways of shaking that are most uncomfortable. Some people like to shake with 2 hands. Some people apply too much pressure in their zealous enthusiasm. And then there are those who just won't let go. These people will actually start a conversation with you all, keeping your hand captive, and you'll find yourself gently pulling to get it back. You know what? Let's get rid of the handshake. There's so many other ways. The Chinese bow, the English tip or raise their hats, the French blow an elegant kiss. Even the Eskimo have their cute little nose-to-nose thing. All of these are much better ways of greeting people than shaking hands. My personal favorite is the way of the Godfather, Don Corleone. 3 kisses on the cheek, and that guy's sleeping with the fishes. Thank you.
Salve, his ego nec metas rerum nec tempora pono. If you haven't studied Latin and didn't understand what I just said, you're not alone. Most people in my home state of Nebraska wouldn't either. It is a shame, though. Even the most basic elements of our medicine, law, history, science, philosophy, and theology owe volumes to it. At one time, you couldn't even attend college without it. Latin is a beneficial and unique opportunity for our students because of its intricate connections with English, and it is statistically correlated. It could improve my home state's educational standing. The study of any foreign language strengthens a high school curriculum. Learning a new language promotes better English and opens up new avenues of cultural exploration. Nonetheless, Latin is a unique opportunity for a student because it is intricately connected to English. Linguists estimate that at least 60% of our vocabulary and 90% of all our multisyllabic words trace their roots back to Latin. J.I. Brown, a prominent linguist, once used only 12 Latin roots and only 20 Latin prefixes to produce over 100,000 English words. More vocabulary and more skill with English syntax has a profound impact on the general understanding of the English language. This has been documented in numerous standardized tests, such as the SAT. According to the College Board's official profile of SAT demographics, any foreign language course will boost scores. However, Latin learners have scored higher than any other foreign language learners year after year after year. And in 2005, they set a record 681 SAT verbal average, higher than any other statistical correlation in history. Admission departments at universities as prestigious as Princeton and Notre Dame admit that 4 years of Latin speaks volumes on resumes and applications. Meanwhile, Nebraska students are suffering. In 2003, Michael O'Connor and Paul Goodsell of the Omaha World Herald published a series of articles denouncing Nebraska's education system for poorly preparing its students for college. According to the National Center for Public Policy and Higher Education, the state's college failure rate is increasing faster than any other state's. Now, one would think that with all the benefits Latin has, the state would encourage it in its classrooms. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. There are 317 high schools in the state of Nebraska, but how many Latin programs are there? Unus, duo, tres, cuatro, quinque, sex, septem. Only 7. I can count them with my fingers. Even worse, this number is on the decline. North Platte High School had the oldest Latin program in the state, but when the instructor moved to California, the school dismantled the program rather than search for a new teacher. How could this happen? Were there no other Latin teachers around? No. Must Latin die with the last generation? No. School systems must avoid this conception that Latin is a dead language. It is a classical language, and as such, it provides opportunities that neither Spanish nor French could ever provide. Trust me, all three have certainly earned their place in the classroom. But all too often, Latin is the one left in the dust. In a time when our Nebraska students need it the most, schools refuse them the medical, legal, historic, and scientific advantages that Latin offers. Our programs walk tightropes over budget cuts and teacher shortages. Our students are losing, and for a prospective Latin educator like myself, this is appalling. For the sake of our youth, we must protect our dead language before it dies forever.
On June 12th last summer, I arrived in Charleston to attend the South Carolina Governor's School for Academics. The Governor's School is a summer program for gifted and talented rising seniors. Students from across the state are nominated to spend a month at the College of Charleston, where they take 2 classes, one in a subject concentration and another on a global issue. In other words, nerd camp. And although I was a little hesitant to spend an entire month of my summer back in school, my governor's school experience turned out to spark my interest in law, it revealed the diversity of my state, and ultimately it renewed my hope for the future of South Carolina's leadership. Now, since I had chosen to spend a month of my summer at nerd camp, my obvious first priority was my classes. My favorite turned out to be Law and Society, where we read Supreme Court decisions, attended courthouse sessions, staged mock trials, and even held public debates. I enjoyed the class so much that I decided to go to law school and to pursue a career in law. So academically, the program helped me to identify my own strengths and to choose a possible career path. Socially, governor's school was even more amazing. I met the most interesting people of my entire life that month in Charleston. Fascinating fellow Gubbies ranged from Nathan, aka Scrabble Boy, a diminutive and prematurely balding local champ who immediately challenged me to a game, to Leah, the self-proclaimed warmonger who is related to Shia Muslims on one side of her family and Al Capone on the other. With 200 varied perspectives like these, the diversity of South Carolina truly shone, and our conversations were much more varied and interesting than any that I could find at home. Now, the visiting dignitaries proved to be equally provocative, if disappointing. Our state superintendent of education skirted our very honest, respectful, straightforward questions and just tried to flaunt marginally improved test scores. The governor was even more evasive, answering our queries about private school vouchers with a long-winded comparison to the movie Top Gun. Now, when he proclaimed that the Dark Ages were after the Renaissance and that World War II was in 1917, even the young Republicans lost hope. But the most disheartening part about these truly lackluster performances was the speaker's obvious shock that young people were well-versed in their issues, held strong opinions, and were more than willing to challenge their authority. So, in the end, it was the Gubbies themselves that renewed my hope for the future of South Carolina. Although we spent our fair share of time roaming King Street, inventing normal teenage drama, and dancing, albeit badly, we spent even more time in discussion, discovering personal truths about normally taboo topics like abortion, war, mortality. That freedom of expression, that quality of interaction, that common ground for truly lasting relationships is the true impetus for our almost weekly reunions and will keep us connected for the rest of our lives. Now, as long as students in our country have similar opportunities to come together, realize their strengths, and to figure out that they are not alone, I can rest easy, knowing that there will be more people in my generation ready to set this backward world straight. Thank you.
Imagine having to deal with this every day. Are you going to name your children Saddam? Is your dad still in prison? Put that hair under a burqa, Hussein. Are you related to Saddam Hussein? My name is Yasmin Hussein. No matter how many times I deny connection to the former dictator of Iraq, the questions keep coming, whether out of ignorance or just plain malice. This problem becomes even more persistent during times of strife between the USA and Middle Eastern countries, an unfortunately increasing occurrence. One of these difficult periods was the 1998 bombing of Iraq. I was in 5th grade then, an insecure and easily influenced age. Challenged by classmates constantly questioning my background and origins, I decided that instead of becoming a proud and defiant upholder of my heritage, I would disown it. I disassociated myself from any links to Iraq or the Middle East, and much to the dismay of my relatives, created a new anglicized Yasmin, the assimilated American who ate at McDonald's, sang Christmas carols, and generally ignored her unique culture. A few years later, I learned that the ancient region of Mesopotamia, including modern Iraq, may have been the birthplace of a civilization. Knowing this and learning more about the history of my family's culture, I once again began to immerse myself in the music, food, dance, and language of Iraq. One thing, however, interrupted my quest: racism. Besides being a factor in my own life, racial profiling also plays a large role in the lives of others in our nation and around the world. Balbir Singh Sodhi, a sheikh from India, was gunned down outside a U.S. gas station. The man who shot him was hauled up to custody hours later, proudly declaring, "I stand for America all the way." Perhaps this type of vigilante action may be encouraged by certain legislation, erroneously connecting innocent Arab Americans to acts of terror throughout the world. And although much of this hate-related crime takes place in large metropolitan areas, some, such as an attempted arson in a Pakistani restaurant nearby the small town where I live, are frighteningly close to home. These sorts of attacks are not unique to the United States of America, however. Amnesty International has reported dramatic increases in hate crime in the United Kingdom, mainland Europe, and even the Middle East. Some people refuse to travel by public transportation in fear of being wrongly targeted for random inspections. Some people, such as my 7-year-old brother Omar, who is detained in an Alabama airport, merely have the wrong name. However, there is still hope for the world. Over 140 United States senators and representatives support passage of the End Racial Profiling Act. Amnesty International is working with governments worldwide and compiling information in order to make this world a safer place for people of all colors. I had the support of family, friends, and mentors, but I am still struggling to brush off harsh comments and rude questions directed at me. I look forward to the day when I can hold my head high and state for the benefit of those who would belittle me, "Look at me, I am Yasmin Hussein."
Before I begin, I must give one warning. Anything I say could be untrue. In fact, everything I say is completely false. Not a word of it is true. But I only tell you the random insanities that I hear from the online discussion group Life, the Universe, and Everything 402, or simply Lou 402. As a user of Lou, or loser, and a hard-working decathlete, it is my sole duty in life to present a proper cross-section of Lou's activities from me to you. You see, in the beginning, the earth was without form and was void. But the sun shone upon the earth, and within the crust was the entity known as Vin Diesel. Once again, I state, everything in this speech about Vin Diesel has been falsified for my own purposes. Vin Diesel is recognized by modern-day authorities for who he is and what he does. As anonymous teen drama icon Paris Hilton says, "Vin Diesel is hot, and everything he does is, like, totally hot." Unfortunately, or fortunately, newly identified teen drama icon hottie Paris Hilton cannot be reached for further comment. However, Vin Diesel is more well known for his past lives, you see. The Vitruvian Man, for instance, is none other than a portrait of Vin Diesel done by the legendary artist Leonardo da Vinci. This was back when Vin Diesel had hair and an aversion to clothing. From here we find that Vin Diesel was a sort of muse to Leonardo da Vinci. There was a greater connection. Once, that great artist, Leonardo, spent years perfecting the portrait of what he thought to be a beautiful young lady, and he offered this portrait to Vin Diesel. Vin took one look at that ugly mad woman, David, and he threw the portrait into the Florentine streets. Leonardo da Vinci was so depressed that he worked non-stop for years to make things right. And because Vin Diesel accepted his second offering, we are now able to enjoy, in its current form, the Mona Lisa. But what happened to that other portrait?